feel it inside of me. He had this laugh. I got the impression that, looking at it from a third person, that was a relationship between a father and a child. And he loved me unconditionally. And at one point I said, I'm not going back there. No way, no how, ever. So I guess I got to move on from this place eventually. And so, what's next? A review of my life? Would you guys like to get started with that? And he just loved that. He just cracked up like I was a little toddler trying to take over. And he said, sure, let's do that. How do you want to start? So I started talking to him. I was telling him. He said, okay, that's enough. He stepped forward like a father and said, time to go back. And that just floored me. I was like, what? Go back? I'm not going back there. There's no way. He says, yeah, you got to go back. You got things to do, and they're important. And it was just he and I, and he came forward, and he's like, okay, you're going back. And as he stepped forward, I felt myself slipping back. The place just started to.
So I was not my soul at that point. I understood and saw that my soul always resided in this spiritual world, in this wonderful heavenly place. And that this Mina that was experiencing this beautiful realm was just an offshoot of that soul, and one tiny bit of it. And I connected with my soul in this realm. That connection has stayed with me all these years. I could never let it go. It was a connection to my soul, but in that connection, I was connected to everything, every aspect of the spiritual world, every aspect of love, every aspect of creation. When they say we are one, it's so true. It's one, but it's all. And I was so infused with that love. And so naturally, my mind went to, how should I live? And I don't know, I guess a part of me thought, just be like a saint, and it was so not that. My guides, one of the main things they told me was to be kind above all else. Be kind. And that to enjoy this life. It's not, take it seriously enough, but enjoy it. That was so important. And I get it now. I get it. When you enjoy life, you have that positive attitude. And that positive attitude keeps you more connected to that spiritual realm than you can imagine. It just keeps you so much more connected. So that was brilliant advice. And to never let hate dwell in my heart, ever. Because that just blocks, your those higher impulses from your soul. It just blocks. Love is the bottom line to everything. And it's so simple, yet we overlook it. That energy of love can do everything. But it's over simple, so we think it should be more complicated than that.
Right, exactly. Where this is taking me. And the tunnel ride was very brief. And then I immediately dropped out of the tunnel into the white light. And the tunnel was very dark, very black inside. So then to be suddenly in this bright, beautiful white light, it took me a moment to adjust to it. And after I had a moment to adjust, the very next thing that I felt was a tremendous amount of love. Love that even, I get emotional even talking about it today. It was the most pure, unconditional love I have ever experienced in my life. It was love for me that no matter what I had ever done in my life, what I had ever been through, it was just pure and unconditional love for me. Death isn't the end. Life is just a chapter. And however we do ultimately transition out of our bodies, there's nothing but peace and love that waits for us on the other side. I did not want to go back into my body after that beautiful experience that I was having in the light. That was the only place I wanted to be. I heard the firm but gentle and loving voice say, you need to go back. And I continued to protest and try to get my way and say that I wanted to stay longer. But I knew that it wasn't a negotiation. And yet, as I continued to protest, I felt myself get nudged lovingly nudged back into the tunnel, very quickly backwards through the tunnel. And then next thing I knew, I was back into my body.
My name is David Williamson, and I'm from a small town in North Carolina called Yanceyville. Growing up in Yanceyville is a small town of not much more than 3,000 people. Growing up there was, for me, is like a Huckleberry Finn kind of story. I was always in the woods, always climbing trees, always life, spiritual understanding, philosophical reckoning that made hating dysfunctional or toxic. Not even when my body started telling me that hating is killing you and you feel it. You can't eat anything and it stays. And almost immediately I'm asleep. And I always try to make note of this fact because people say you're hallucinating, right? But I passed out before I went into the area where they were working on me. But I'm not dead, I don't think, because my perspective is on the bed, like I'm looking that way. But I'm not seeing anything but where the people were. There were dots that almost looked like a nighttime sky. And that stuff was clear to me in that state. But as far as explaining it to my conscious mind, there's no way I can know why I understood what was happening in that moment. After I saw the blackness and the dots where the people were, my perspective shifted and I was above myself looking down. And I saw the whole setup of the room. I saw where the people were. They were still kind of positioned, where everybody was at, including a woman that was in the corner of the room. She was holding her face like this, and she was really sad that I was dying. And that was initially when I left my body, that was one of the things that disturbed me the most. Was like, what in the world is she sad for? This is so beautiful. This is so perfect. I'm not hurting, no, I'm not confused. That guy is dead, but I'm alive. This is beautiful, So to me, that just clarifies that it's not a hallucination. I learned while I was out of my body. I saw in real time what was happening to me. And everything, when I opened my eyes, continued in real time. There was no separation in my awareness, gap in between what I was experiencing, whether I was in the body or out of the body. It was a continual flow of experience. Once I did leave my body and I looked down, there was a lot of things that I came to understand. Like, he's dead, his body's dead, the mind is dead, the ego's dead. And after that kind of series of kind of realizations, it was like, well, then what's left? Like, what am I? And the words flooded in very clearly. It was audible. These words were light, energy, soul, spirit, awareness. It's just a flood of words. If they weren't in a line like a mechanical, it was like a bunch of voices just said these words. But it felt like it was me explaining this to myself. Everything felt like love. And I felt like a part of that whole thing. I didn't feel separate from it at all. And everything that I looked at, every question I had, the clarity was instantaneous. Casually take my attention up. And when I do that, instantly I'm in space. There was no tunnel, there was no anything. I quickly became aware of what people call the light. It was up and to the right of me. The emergency room was down and to the left of me. And I was in that angle, looking forward out into space. And what was in front of me was the star-forming region. What was beneath me was what people call the void. I felt like I was in the blackness, and it was enveloping me like velvet. It felt like love. It felt like every other aspect of being disembodied in that moment for me. Everything felt like love. I felt like love. I felt like the system that I found myself in was just love, and I was just a part of it. But it also felt like it was everything. It felt like everything, every possibility, every past experience, everything was in the void, was in that black space. When I looked into it, it reacted, it responded. And if there was any kind of thought that wasn't complete, it was complete instantly. If there was a notion of missing something, the satisfaction of having that, I felt it already. Before the missing was even fully felt, the satisfaction of already having that was there. There's a woman I was exchanging with who was like, well, I don't want to just magically forget people that I love in this life. I was trying to explain that that's a human thought. It comes from a brain, it comes from memory, it comes from life, it comes from, but you're not going to be, when you leave this body, a human body with a brain that has memory, you're going to be an energy that's so connected to this experience and this whole thing that experience is integrated in you. There is no missing or something missing from that experience isn't gone. It's always accessible. Every part of this experience that you have is etched in infinity. There is no something disappearing and never being experienceable again. Like, it's always there. So you don't miss anything. There's no missing anything. You're more integrated with the system outside of the body than you are in the body. And that's kind of what we are, is an individual node accumulating a perspective that ultimately gets fed back into the system and becomes a possibility, an option for everybody else in the system forever. So your experience isn't ever lost. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything. There was no pain, no trauma at all in the process of me dying. Catching my breath on the way to the hospital was as deep as the pain of my death got. So it just made me, it's like I have no fear of dying. I have no fear of what's next. Looked back down into the emergency room. And when my attention went from the upper angle down back to the left, it went through me, and I was just a glowing orb of light. That's what I appeared to be. I never felt more alive than when I was that glowing orb of light. I never felt more aware of what was happening on this planet. In that state, I understood everything. The pain, the confusion, the identity stuff was gone. We are all orbs of light. We're not these bodies. I experienced the orb of light as being perfect, as being not confused, as not being contextualized in a human sense in a way where it's going to cheerlead for one side or the other. It was disconnected somewhat from the specifics of the human experience. It was just aware. You were in that body. That body's dead. It wasn't like, you were a black activist and you need to go back and hop in that body and get to the fight. No more fighting. That fight stuff was done. Own that. You got to own that thought. You got to own that thought because that thought contributed to the tension that was created in that moment. So we have to learn how to understand what we're doing here and what we're choosing. Don't allow tension and pain and confusion to persist for too long because it'll hurt you and it'll influence your perspective of reality in a way that's not. It'll give you a bias. So when you feel it, fix it so that the bias doesn't sit in you so long to where it's part of you and now it's hard to get it out of you. What my experience showed me is that we tend to become the emotions versus just feeling them and letting them pass. It's like I became hate instead of just saying, oh, damn, that was hateful. Do I want to respond in kind of, we don't pause and be like, and think about the impact of feeling hate on your physical being. Very well be justified in your anger, and you're definitely going to feel justified in your anger, right? But my anger killed me. So if I was able to see what I was in a different way, instead of responding to it with anger, responding to it with responsibility, responding to it with hope, I can help change that. My experience occurred in such a way that it gave me some different kind of clarity. And there is an opportunity for me to move forward differently, period. Now, if I don't take that opportunity, that's a choice that I make. But the opportunity exists. You will revisit the same things that led to your death. And I do. I revisit the same frustration. I revisit the same, sometimes, moments of hopelessness. But now I just am I going to choose to stay in that emotion? Am I going to become hopelessness? Am I going to become frustration? Am I going to become hate? No. I'm going to process it. Let it do what it's going to do in that moment and then leave it alone. Let it go and move on to the next thought, the next choice. We just having an experience here. And because of the narratives and the stories that we choose, it becomes a negative experience, a positive experience. But it's all just stories, and you don't have to choose those stories. You come here already equipped with how to function here. And then we're not taught to honor that in any way whatsoever. We're taught who to be, what we are, what our name is, how we, what's important, who we're supposed to like, who we're supposed to hate, how we're supposed to, we're told all of this stuff. And then we expect people to develop into authentic human beings when they've never made a decision for themselves at all. They just accepted prepackaged identities. There's no choice in that you're just selecting from among what's not even available to you, but it's actually what's pushed on you by people who actually love you. They're giving you this advice because they love you. They're telling you to think this way because they think it worked for them. And I just want you to, be okay, but it doesn't work. Yep. Look at the world around us. This thinking and these orientations that we have towards each other and this planet and this life doesn't work. It doesn't work. The more clear I have become about what being a human being is, the mind, the body, the ego, and this soul thing, that is infinite and it leaves this place is perfect. It doesn't hold on to human trauma. It doesn't hold on to this stuff. It doesn't. But it's permanent, and it's what you leave here as. That's what you are. We are creating our next life right now in this moment with our attention. And as long as we can own our attention and not allow our attention to be totally manipulated and injected with a bunch of software that doesn't originate inside of us. If you focus on misery, you're compounding misery. If you focus on hope, you're increasing the probability that other things can happen outside of the negative possibilities. And if we collectively start understanding how to galvanize our attention in different ways, then we can magnify our creative capacity. If an individual can focus their attention on what they want and get it, imagine if 20,000, 30,000, a million individuals can focus their attention on unified and what they can create.